Hello and welcome. My name is Ryan, and today I will be discussing how we can utilize decision-making frameworks to progress and improve the success rates within emotional therapy. Now, I will be discussing topics like cognitive behavioral therapy and how these decision-making aspects can improve success rates within these sessions. Now, as an overview, I will be identifying key frameworks that I have selected that I perceive to be the most significant aspects that can really improve the success rates. I will be applying these frameworks to show how they can enhance therapeutic outcomes. I will be implementing these frameworks within therapist training, and then I will give a few barriers for these implementations. Now, the first thing that I would like to discuss is the subjective utility theory, which is the idea that whenever we make a decision, we aim to seek as much pleasure as possible and avoid as much pain as possible. Now, these will vary between person to person. Um, this will be depending on personal values, what we see as important, and also an estimation of how likely we think something is going to happen. So another thing that I wanted to quickly mention here is unnecessary constraints, which I wanted to show by explaining the string problem. Now, imagine we are this person in this room here. Our goal is to find a way to tie these strings together. Now, the catch is that these strings are too short to be able to be tied together to if we are trying to hold them both. We cannot because they're too short. Now, we have some extra things in the room. You've got some paintbrushes, you've got a paint can, and there's some charcoal. Now, often what people will assume is that these strings have to stay static within throughout the entire thing and that they cannot move, which is an unnecessary constraint. There is nothing within the problem that says they cannot move. They absolutely can move, but most people will give themselves this personal constraint and make the problem borderline unsolvable. Um, so something that people will do if they don't apply this constraint is they may come to the conclusion like this image on the right, where they attach something to the end of the other string and then swing it back and forth like a pendulum to be able to grab it from the other side. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention was means end analysis heuristic, which is the idea that we want to reduce the distance from the current state to the end goal state as quickly as possible by using as little efforts as possible. Now, another diagram that explains this quite well is the Tower of Hanoi. Now, people are asked to get this tower from this left rod to this right rod. Now, with a few catches, you could only move the ring on the top of the stack. You could only move one ring at a time, and you cannot have a larger ring on top of a smaller ring. Now, what people often fail to see here is that you have to take steps back away from the goal states to then be able to actually reach the goal state, because they try and use this heuristic to get there as quickly as possible. Another type of heuristic is representative heuristic, which is the idea that we make an initial judgment based off of certain stereotypes that we form. Now, considering this with therapy, some people may believe that they need to have a serious condition to be able to actually attend therapy, which isn't the case at all. They People can attend therapy sessions for things that are significantly smaller than significant mental health issues. This could be overwhelming stress or could be relationship issues within themselves. Um, Another thing another potential stereotype that people have is that they require a diagnosis before attending a therapy session, which is also completely incorrect. Therapy is open to everyone, um, and is can be utilized for anyone that seeks to benefit their own self and improve their own quality of life. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention was inductive reasoning, which is essentially a judgment that we make based off of our own previous experience. This is very well explained by this little skit here. This is the idea. This is here because something I'd considered is that if people had already gone to, or if already had therapy sessions before, and it didn't turn out as well as they'd hoped, they may use this past experience to make judgments based off of to make their judgments on therapy, and then may not attend another session because of these past experiences. Another thing that I wanted to mention for this is opportunity costs. Some people may also not want to attend these sessions because of these opportunity costs. So what I'm referring to here is the idea that they don't want to go to therapy because they feel that something else will suffer because of it. For example, their social life or maybe even their professional work life. And I know many people like to take a lot of pride in their work. I know I do. Um, and sometimes they may feel forced to prioritize that all over their like over their mental health status. So, and which is a kind of thinking that therapists need to guide people away from to be able to make these sessions more effective. Now, finally, I wanted to mention confirmation bias, which is the idea that we seek to affirm a statement if it agrees with our prior beliefs. Now, another of I have a example here, which is the Wason card selection task. So essentially, the concept is that a card has a letter on one side and a number on the other. People are given the statement that if there is a vowel on one side, there is an even number on the other side. And people are asked to determine how many cards or which cards to flip over to determine whether this rule is true or not. Now, oftentimes, people will flip over this A card and this 2 card. What this does is this is a confirmation bias because the statement here is telling us that it's giving us one of those conditions, and these cards meet one of those conditions. People will often pick those cards to see if the card agrees with the statement, which suffers from confirmation bias. Whereas what they should be doing is picking this 3 cards because it's assuming that the statement is wrong. Essentially, what we should be doing is showing people that a statement should be thought of as incorrect or false until it is proven correct. Now, applying these to enhance therapeutic outcomes, using this decision making science can make identifying these problems easier and then finding ways of incorporating this into CBT. A study done by Megan Leddy and some other researchers, they were discussing the similarities and differences between the decision making science and cognitive behavioral therapy and how these can inform each other and improve both fields as a whole. And they were discussing that decision making science focuses very solely on describing these problems, whereas CBT focuses more on picking them apart and focusing on how we think about these and why we think about these. So another thing that you can do is break confirmation bias to create new lines of thinking. So this is essentially more for people who are having negative thoughts, um, who are affirming their own negative thoughts. So therapists can try and encourage different ways of thinking for their clients to be able to encourage more positive thinking about themselves. Another thing they can do is steer general representation of therapy away from these heuristic processes. Now, this refers back to the means end analysis heuristic, which is the idea of finding a way to the end goal state with as little effort as possible. You can't always do that, as shown by the string problem, and also the Tower of Hanoi. So, so finding ways to get people to understand that it's okay to take some steps back to be able to find a way forward is crucial. And finally, applying subjective utility theory to understand reasons why people wouldn't attend therapy. So, for example, they may be giving themselves some personal constraints, which may make them feel that they cannot go to therapy for certain reasons. So therapists should find a way to encourage people to come to them when they need it and find ways of breaking these constraints. Now, implementing these frameworks, I've suggested some alternate communication training. This links back to confirmation bias, which is trying to find ways to convert negative thinking into slightly more positive thinking within clients. And you can also enhance a therapist's logical understanding of these potentially self-inflicted constraints. Once again, this is an unnecessary constraint situation. People might be forcing themselves to stick by themselves. They might be, if they are, let's say, they're suffering from extreme sad moods, they may be isolating themselves, further making these issues develop, and they might be constraining themselves this way. So finding ways of working around these constraints to be able to help these people more. And then I've put adapt a therapeutic environment here just because this is more to break heuristics and stereotypes, so that people feel more welcome as a client to be able to go to therapy, and more people may feel more invited to go to therapy because they feel comfortable within these environments. Now, potential barriers, I've mentioned cultural difference and sensitivity. Obviously, therapy is a very, very delicate subject as is. And suffering from these cultural differences may be very difficult for therapists to truly empathize with their clients. Another thing I've mentioned is potential legal implications. A lot of these processes will have to be checked through, for us in the UK, will have to be checked through the NHS and the government, and also the British Psychological Society. And finally, is respecting the autonomy of the therapeutic process. Now, the reason I've mentioned this is because if we were to try and add too many steps within these therapeutic sessions, we find that it may all crumble in on itself, and it may actually reduce the effectiveness rather than increase the effectiveness. So taking the time and making sure that the process stays not similar but consistent throughout is crucial. So in conclusion, the decision-making processes and therapy lie very close to each other. Finding ways of developing understanding of processes will allow therapists to understand their clients significantly easier. And finally, finding ways of changing initial judgments to therapy may make it easier for more people to consider attending sessions and may make them feel more comfortable within sessions. Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time.